स्कायरल पे जा रहे हैं अभी। स्कायरल हम लोग स्मिथफील्ड से लिए और अभी इसमें बैठे हैं। 10 मिनट का एक ये जर्नी है, शॉर्ट जर्नी है। वहाँ पे फिर हम लोग नीचे उतरेंगे और उसके बाद थोड़ा सा वहीं पे एक्सप्लोर करेंगे चीज़ें, और उसके बाद फिर हम लोग वापस उसके ऊपर भी वापस जाना है। और आई थिंक बहुत हाइट पे है, बहुत अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस है। और ये जहाँ तक मैंने पढ़ा था कहीं पे, आई थिंक ये मिलियन ईयर्स ओल्ड और भी ज़्यादा पुराना ये रेन फॉरेस्ट है, बहुत पुराना रेन फॉरेस्ट है।
You guys probably all came from Smithfield, yeah? So this is your first stop. The next stop is Falls. Falls is where the waterfalls are, and then your destination is Kuranda, the little village. Here at Red Peak, we're in the midst of the rainforest, and we're in the midst of the wet tropics World Heritage Area. That's what we call the whole rainforest here. It's World Heritage protected. Very high status of protection, same as the Great Barrier Reef. And our rainforest is the oldest rainforest in the world. It started in Gondwana back in the days on the supercontinent, and it never went away, so it's still here. Now, have you guys heard of Gondwana? Yeah? Maybe you heard of Pangaea? Pangaea was the supercontinent, the original one, 250 million years ago, and Pangaea split into two, into Laurasia on the northern hemisphere and Gondwana on the southern hemisphere, and most of Gondwana was rainforest. So that rainforest was covering basically half the planet, and the climate was very different back then. But over the next 200 odd million years, as the continents drifted apart and the planet went through different climate cycles and in general cooled down a lot, that rainforest disappeared almost everywhere. You know, only a few spots, it never disappeared, and eventually they're going to take over both of those trees and strangle them to death and replace them. Very slow process, but that's the life cycle. Really cool, hey? As we walk around here, you're gonna see the host tree as well, the original one. Just in the middle here, that's a bumpy satin ash. You can also see these weird roots hanging in the air. We call them adventitious roots. They're looking for anything to grow around or for the ground to grow into. And if you're hanging around Cairns for some time, keep your eyes open. You can find stranglefigs everywhere. If you see these weird roots hanging in the air, that's a stranglefiग. There's a few on the Cairns Esplanade. They're actually very common. There's hundreds of different subspecies of them, and they grow to immense sizes. Some of them look like straight out of Avatar. Any questions so far? No. Fantastic, follow me. Okay, here we have a climbing palm. And the climbing palm also has a special strategy to get to the top of the canopy and get that precious sunlight. It starts just like a normal palm on the ground, and then it grows really fast and it stays skinny and climbs up the other trees. You can see this one here is still standing on its own, but it's starting to reach out to this poor little tree and also to these trees with the tendrils. The tendrils look like this, and they swing around in the wind and cling on to the next best tree or to the next best ranger. And then they slowly make their way all the way to the top of the canopy, and they keep growing sideways from tree to tree to tree. The longest one they ever found was 300 meters long. That makes it one of the longest plants in the world. This one here is still small though. On the way down, I'll show you one that's a little bit more mature, because they changed the look a bit. Of these trees, if you look closely, you can see the same tendrils and leaves that we just looked at. Those ferns up there. In between the top and the bottom, we don't need any tendrils or leaves anymore. So it sheds them off and we're left with rattan cane. Does anyone know what you can use rattan cane for? Furniture, exactly. This is what your rattan furniture is made out of. This is where it comes from. There's a few other plants across the world as well that are very similar, but this is a common one to make rattan furniture, and it's our local one, and it's traditionally very important for the Jebekai speaking people. The indigenous folks around here, they've been using that to make tools and baskets and huts for thousands of years. On the way down, you'll see a few more of these climbing palms. There's a long one just on the right side here. Tarzan, you can swing off that. Because there's a weird basket hanging in the tree up there. Can you see that? It's a basket fern. It's a form of an epiphyte. That means it grows on top of another tree and it spends its whole life up there. Basket ferns are the largest epiphytes in the world. They grow to the size of a car. If you turn around and look at the top of the really big tree, you can see a large one. Each basket fern...
Can't hear you back there.
Oh. Each basket fern is like its own little ecosystem. So thousands of insects in there, and also tree frogs, tree snakes, and birds. Alright, follow me. Big group today. So did you guys hear that about the basket ferns? They're epiphytes that grow on top of other trees, and they don't need any soil. They produce their own soil. If you want to see one, there's another one just up here. It looks like a giant patch of soil, and they grow to immense sizes. There's actually one just behind me on the ground that fell down with the last cyclone. It's still alive. It's gonna keep growing on the ground as long as it gets enough sunlight. And here you can see the soil it produces. Really cool, hey? And yeah. Now, it fell out of this tree. A really big one. That's a Queensland Kerry pine. Has anyone heard of the Kerry pines before? This one here is around 400 years old, maybe 450. We don't know exactly. And it's been here for some time. It's been here longer than Europeans have been in Australia. That only happened 250 years ago, pretty recently. It's gonna grow to about 1,000 years old, so it's still got 550 good years ahead of it, and it's gonna get at least twice as thick, maybe 3 times as thick. It's not gonna get any taller though. Once they reach the top of the canopy, they go 3-4 meters above that, and then they stop because they have all of the sunlight they need. And then they get thicker and thicker. Yeah, we call it a emergent species because they emerge out of the canopy. Incredible, these trees. They're also very straight. They were commercially logged up until 35 years ago, and unfortunately they chopped down almost every single one of them. You'd find them all across Cairns and the tablelands back in the days. today you only find small ones. This here is one of the larger ones that's still left over. If you come back in 500 years, we'll have a lot more big ones around. There's another small one over there. This one's around 200 years old. The wood that it makes is actually fantastic for building all kinds of things, from furniture to houses, porches, or ships. And that's because it's pine wood, it's very straight, and it's slightly hydrophobic. It pushes away water, so it lasts longer than normal pine wood. Yeah, but don't cut them down. This one here, of course, is protected, but if you grow them on your own property and you wait 500 years, you can cut your own tree down. You guys know the Kuranda Railway, the train that goes from Kuranda down to Cairns? That was built to get these logs down into the city. Before it turned into tourism. What's special about the Kerry pines is how ancient this species is. We have fossil records of this kind of tree going back 210 million years. That's a long, long time. For reference, does anyone know when the dinosaurs first emerged? They died out around 65 million years ago. When did they first pop up? Around 230 million years ago. That means this kind of tree has seen most dinosaurs come and go. And it's still here. You'd find them all across Gondwana, the supercontinent. So also in Africa, South America. If you're ever bored on your off day and you go to Antarctica and you dig underneath the ice, you find fossils of this. Now, because it's so ancient, it has some special features. Can you spot the pine needles on this pine? That's a trick question. There's no needles. Instead, we get pine leaves. You ever seen pine leaves before? Yeah, there's only a handful of species left alive today that have pine leaves. Pine leaves are a lot more ancient than pine needles. Pine needles evolved later on, around 150 million years ago, as an adaptation to cold weather. Because needles need less energy and they hold the water better. So across Southeast Asia. Traditionally, in Thailand, they get fried up and eaten. Now, very special, this spider grows up to 20 centimeters. That's pretty large, depending on the conditions. And do you reckon this one is a female or a male? Male? Gotcha. No, that's a female. The females grow large, they're pretty harmless. And they are a little bit venomous, because all spiders are to some degree. That's how they kill their prey. But this one, if it bites you, it's gonna hurt, but it's not gonna kill you, and it's not gonna send you to the hospital either. In general, they're very calm. If you pick one up, it's not gonna bite you unless you squeeze it. And they just like it, they don't do that. Although, who knows? Maybe we just haven't seen it yet. Very special. This web here can be up to 4 or 5 meters across. I'll show you a bigger one on the way up. And it's among the strongest spider webs in the world. Not the strongest. That time is held by another golden orb weaving spider. But I did the calculation. If you compare the web to a dust, that's the one we're in right now. And the Barren Gorge National Park is one of 30 national parks that make up the Wet Tropics World Heritage Area. So our rainforest. If you look closely on the right hand side, you can see the gondolas. That's where you're going next. And you can see the top of the Barren Falls right next to it. That's where those little clouds come out of the forest. Those clouds are made by the waterfalls. That's going to be our next stop. Now, here we usually talk a little bit about animals. We've only seen spiders so far. If you want to see more bigger animals, you got to be real lucky. Because of course animals are scared of us, they don't want to be seen, we're not a zoo. But if you come out at dawn or dusk or at night, you tend to see a lot more than during daytime. What you commonly find around here are all kinds of marsupials, for example tree kangaroos, musky red kangaroos. You find cassowaries, those really large birds. You also find a lot of possums. and flying foxes, all kinds of bats, and lots of snakes, tree snakes, pythons, brown snakes, black snakes. My favorite animal is definitely the cassowary. Have you guys seen cassowaries before? Yeah? Cassowary is a large flightless bird that can be bigger than me. It's the second heaviest bird in the world, up to 75 kilograms, so heavier than me. And they're native to this rainforest. They've been here for 45 million years. That's a long time. That goes back to when Australia split off from Antarctica. And they're like an unknowing gardener for our rainforest. They eat immense amounts of fruits and seeds every day, and they disperse all of those seeds around the rainforest. Those trees around here have evolved alongside the cassowary for the last 45 million years, and a lot of them solely rely on the cassowary to spread those seeds. They've evolved seeds that can't be eaten by anything else because they're so big, and some trees actually need to send their seeds through the digestion of a cassowary, otherwise they can't germinate. Yeah. Now, the cassowary luckily is back up to healthy numbers, more or less. There have been a lot of conservation effort over the last few decades, and we have around 4,000 or 5,000 in our rainforest now. If you're lucky enough to see one, keep your distance. They can be quite defensive, but they're not aggressive. But they can screw you up if they would want to. Never feed them, very important. Sometimes we see them at the stations, but more so early morning. I saw one 2 weeks ago at Barrenfold Station. Wonderful. Now, any more questions?